So what I'm talking about today is, we've been working on a real mechanism to generate the concepts for data sets. And one of the things I did this week was play with some of the data sets that Drodio has been using for demos, just to see, kind of what the outcome would be, and to understand some of the, like there was 300 plus documents in this. What does it look like as you increment the data set over time? So what I'm going to go through is a one-shot generation of the concepts that occurred for the Comcast data set that Jodio had previously done. Um, there's a link here. I'll share this out again. Oh, get out of here. Stop. How did I get this to go away? Okay, 1 second. So what I want to talk about is not so much the outcome here, but how this got to be here, right? So if you looked at the data set that Jodio had been working off, we produced 4,196 chunks. So these are the embeddings that we generate from the asset ingestion process, right? Uh, from those chunks, we then derived 1,068 seeds, and there we ended with 25 concepts, right? So the concepts would then, have a total of 1,068 seed members in them. So when you're looking at the graph, you would see a concept and then all of the seeds that would be part of that. So this is kind of that distillation process of getting the signal from the noise, right? We start with 4,000 of something, we get 1,000 of something, and then finally we end up with 25 of something, which is, obviously quite a bit of reduction in the noise, so to speak. So now this is kind of the easy part. There's another thing that a concept is in V3 that is maybe not as obvious. So what is that, Jordio?
What is that? That's not as
Hmm?
obvious. Oh,
It's not as obvious. So I think everybody understands, conceptually, you know, we're going to present the data in a view that is, in these concepts, and they can then drill into those. But there's another thing that concepts become in the workflows, and that is they're a dependency.
hmm.
So if you log into Storytell v3 and you ask a question that says, "Hey, tell me everything about this at concept," well, that's safe because that's what exists right now, right? If you go into V3 and you configure an action that says, and you go through the process of configuring an action, what you're really doing is testing, right? You're writing a prompt, you're doing stuff, whatever the things are, you're testing against the data set that is against this concept. And so when you click submit, and this is the action that I want, well, all of a sudden that concept becomes a dependency. So what does that mean? What's the implication of that?
Well,
So
it's going to change over
Well, I
time.
can't.
Well, the the identifier cannot change, right? But the uh, representation of that concept is going to change.
Yeah.
And it's possible that a user wants to go in and delete that concept.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a dependency. And so what I've, having played with this quite a bit over the last week and weeks, what I think what we're going to have to do is when a concept is created, the members can never move out, new members can move in, right?
wait, when you say members, Shelby, are the members the chunks,
The seeds, right?
the seeds?
Yeah. Which are immutable in our world. Um, the only really immutable thing that we have in this is an asset, right? You can only ever create or delete one. Uh, and as such, the seeds are also immutable. So the seeds are immutable. So once seeds land onto a cluster node, in the concepts, right? It really can't ever move off because if you allow them to move off, then what the concept is will fundamentally change, especially as you get into hundreds of concepts, and that growth, like what the concept was today will end up being completely changed over time, right? So it does not work as a dependency if you allow movement off. So what I've had to do to get around this is to only ever allow additions into the concept.
I'm not sure. So let's imagine the concept is first quarter sales performance.
Yep.
Now that first quarter might be a different year every time I look at it. But I think that's the idea. If I think it's okay that happens. Like I do always want to be looking at the first quarter, but I might want to be looking at a different year of the first quarter. If I don't want it to change, I would use a label where I would manually apply a label to specific assets.
I think
Well,
what you're talking about is an evolution, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Shelby, but if the seeds they're sticky and they can't get unstuck, but then new seeds arrive because new information's added, and even that information may conflict with something before, like companies profitable, companies not profitable. The concept is just evolving as new state arrives. Is that right?
yeah, like this name summary description will change over time, right? But the components that ever make it up really can't leave because as you're going through this process today of building something against it, it has to stay that. It can't turn from being, sales data from Q1 to cars, which is what will happen if you allow things to be deleted from it. So,
And I think in the Q1 example, it's just important that we're talking about the right quarter always, right?
right.
Financial year 2024, 2025.
Yeah. And that's deriving, queries into the concept, right? Based on time frames. So, um, that's really it. That's really what I wanted to talk about more was, what do concepts become in our new world that we're moving to, outside of what we've kind of been thinking about them in terms of, hey, it's a pretty picture, right? And we can find signal and noise, but as we make them become dependencies, um, we've got to do some things to make sure that the dependencies don't change. We can't have a we can't have a complete flip of things or else things will break. So that's it. Anybody have any questions?
Are you having fun?
I'm having fun.
Yeah. Have you enjoyed this particular project?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. We're having to, this is going to be like there's k-means, there's k-means plus plus, and there's going to be k-means times Storytell. So what's coming, right? So yeah, we're just shifting the algorithm around a little bit. It's been a good time. Oh,
I'd like to try to paraphrase what we're saying to see if at least I'm understanding it correctly. So Shelby, to paraphrase you, a concept can be additive, new things can be added to it, but nothing can be removed. It's a one-way door. And the reason for that is because if we allow things to be removed, then an action that's created will break. And so an action was created about first quarter sales performance. It's supposed to send a report, and then things are removed, and that action can no longer run. Is that accurate?
oh, it would run, but it could potentially have disastrous results.
What would the disastrous results be?
If it was, as an example, I was, I was dependent on this concept, which was, the makeup of a certain type of customer, as an example, right? And that concept, which is just an ID in the system, right, is evolves to become a description of cars,
Mm-hmm.
then how it's used is going to break, right?
Right.
So in order to do that, we've got to keep, um, I'll go back and show.
I think, what I hear you saying, and maybe this helps, is that you could think of it like an event log. We've logged that this concept was made of these three documents. And that was the state that the user tested, right? And that was the state of the concept at the time. And new documents arrive which evolve the concept, but you can't ever take the history of it away.
Right. And so, Aaron, I think to your point, I may very well want to curate a concept where I change its meaning quite substantially. And I
Well,
want to
those are
have,
new updates, right?
right,
You're going in and then that's coming in with a high confidence because you, the human, went in and did something in it. I think that's the evolution of the concept.
right. And so just to paraphrase that, then Shelby, would it be true? We always have an event log, we always have a timeline of the concept that can never be taken away. But as a human, I could say, I do want this concept to be about cars because the concept has changed in our organization. And so what's actually used, the data that's actually used in that log changes.
Yeah, I think the answer there would be, you know, to delete and add, right? I mean, how we manifest it may look different than that, but underneath the hood, we would just effectively, if a human being doesn't like the outcome of what has been generated, you know, then they could remove it and basically effectively create a seed that would end up being the centroid that would stick, right? Um, which would be the center, you know, of the center of the concept. But I don't think we would necessarily keep the old stuff around at that point. So
But how would just natural updates occur then? Some new press release went out that announces company A has been acquired by company B, and there's some major shift in strategy, or some significant change, and that just gets naturally ingested. Do you think it would shift the point, or is it?
yeah, I mean, it all just comes down to distance and semantic similarity, right? So it may not land on where you would think it would land, and it's you know
How would we use this? So how would this use case work? If I want to subscribe to a concept, which is the top performing seller in my company, that's the concept I want to subscribe to. That's going to be a very dynamic thing,
mhm.
right? Versus, I think about labels as being very static, like labels are attached to assets, concepts are attached to chunks of whatever is the highest affinity around that concept. Would I be able to do that in the way that you're building it, Shelby?
Temporal, right?
Yeah, I mean that's just over time, right? You're really just saying I want the top sellers from last week. You're not saying the top sellers, you're saying I want the top sellers from some period of time.
Uh,
So that would work. I think what is going to be challenging though is the biggest challenge is going to be, the expectation side of things, right? Like you just said, hey, I want to follow a concept that is the top sellers in my company.
mhm.
You may not have a concept that is the top sellers in your company.
Well, if I were to define that concept manually, then it would just be whatever content matches that most closely. And yeah, there may not be anything that matches it most closely, and that's okay if there's not.
Right. So yeah, I would say again, like, you know, this is best viewed as the discovery mechanism to what the machine thinks, right? And while we can allow people to effectively generate a seed that will become, a center, right? Um, I think we'll always have a bit of an expectations mess there, right? So
So on that, like if a human does go in and they don't like what the machine said, but they like that it's for top seller, right? And it's really the at mention ID that they're attaching in their mind, right?
yeah,
When we do the diff between what it was and what they're trying to make it, um, I suppose there's a way to just detect that it was significant enough that we should do that cleanup delete operation. Right, so it's all new seeds, right? It's a whole different fork. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's more, it's just like an asset, you know. It's we would RM the asset and replace it, you know,
yeah.
replace it
So
with
they,
seed they provided. And all we're talking about is, um, you know, the way this works. There's four-step process, you know, to it. You know, you have to determine what's the optimal number of concepts based on the size of the data set, right? You then have to initially place um, kind of what the center of those are going to be, right? Which we're using k-means plus plus for that. Then you do an initial round of assignments, and then you iterate until there's no discrepancies, right? Until you get convergence. So what we're really saying is that when a human being injects something into the concepts, it will always be selected as a centroid to start.
and in the example where they've kind of completely changed it, um, and what's durable in their mind is the at mentioned tag,
Hmm.
um, and it's just a pointer to something, right? And so it would just point to something else, and
Yeah.
it's like letting go of the balloons. Those ones go away, and you're holding new balloons.
Yep. Yep. But that would cause a pretty big shift, probably. So, but it's the same thing that we're doing on the incrementation side is instead of it being, the previous state, we're allowing a user to inject new state, right? So it works the same way. There's no technical difference between the two things.